And the reality is every community needs a range of housing options, right? Because if you think about your life, at different points in your life, you have different housing needs. We know that where we live impacts everything in our life, right?
So you get a piece of land, then how are you developing it? Like you have like builders you work with, I'm assuming.
We do. We have to get the money. And so we kind of come up with a plan of what we think we can do on the land.
Hi, I'm Corey Getz with UHQ Construction. Today, we've got a special guest. We're here in Hamilton County talking a little bit about affordable housing and Hands Inc. Today, we have the executive director, Andrea Davis, with me. Thanks, Andrea, for joining me. Looking forward to talking a little more about affordable housing and what exactly Hands Inc. does here in Hamilton County.
Sure.
So, first off, what does Hands Inc. do?
Sure. So we're a nonprofit, and what the simplest way to explain what we do is we build, preserve, and advocate for affordable housing in the suburbs.
Yeah, and we definitely need more of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every community needs more.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did you end up coming to work at Hands?
It's been a journey. I was actually a journalist in my first life, and was looking to do something that would benefit the community, but would use the skills that I developed as a journalist. I was a newspaper reporter and editor, so I was used to taking really complicated issues and figuring out as much as I could about them, and then boiling it down in a way that would be understandable to someone who didn't know anything about it. And when I came to Hand, I knew I wanted to work at a nonprofit because they do such great work in our community. They're so needed. But when I came to work at Hand, what I found was my ability to take a really complicated topic like affordable housing and boil it down in a way that makes it understandable, not just to the people who need affordable housing, but to the folks who need to be involved in making affordable housing happen. If they could understand the need a little bit more, then our conversations were a lot more productive. So it just felt like a really good fit to apply those skills in this context.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I think, especially in Hamilton County, like the thought of affordable housing, especially people that live in central Indiana are like, well, Hamilton County, exactly. Affordable housing, like there's no such thing here, exactly. Right?
And the reality is every community needs a range of housing options, right? Because if you think about your life, at different points in your life, you have different housing needs, right? When you're newly married and raising a family, maybe you want that small home that you own, you want to mow the grass and decorate for Christmas and stuff like that. But maybe fresh out of high school or college, you just want to rent a little apartment and that sort of thing. And what happened as Hamilton County grew is we weren't creating all of those different types of housing options. We were building pretty much, if you look at the continuum, we were building a lot on this end, right? Like the $450,000 single family custom homes and that sort of thing. And not a lot of starter homes or apartments that weren't luxury apartments. So a community really needs everything in order to thrive, in order to have residents that are there throughout their lives. So
yeah, absolutely. I've heard so many stories about, Carmel 50, 60 years ago was cornfields.
Yes.
And Fishers and Zionsville, right? And now it's
a different world.
Yeah, it's grown up really quickly. I think, like you said, it's like very focused on a higher end home.
Yeah, I mean, it's the suburbs, so that was kind of the nature of the suburbs, right? As you get tired of the houses really close to each other in the city, so you'd move out where you could live on a cul-de-sac and have more land and all that.
A yard and a fence.
Exactly.
Yeah. Place for the kids to play, neighborhood pool.
For sure.
Yeah. So with Hand, like what is a source of inspiration for helping low to moderate income individuals, families, and senior citizens in the northern Indianapolis suburbs?
Yeah. We know that where we live impacts everything in our life, right? I mean, where you live determines where you go to school, so the type of education that you get, how safe you feel when you go outside at night, your health even, there are lots of health indicators that can be predicted based on your zip code. So we feel like Hamilton County is such a wonderful place of opportunity that it should be available for people in every stage of their life. Like I said, it should be somewhere that people can grow up in and then return to and raise their own families. And if we don't have that full range of housing options, then we really can't accommodate people throughout their lives. We'll have this narrow, like, you can live here, when you're at this point in your career that you can afford this, but, and I don't think that's the community that we built. I mean, I think we built a community so that our kids can come back and raise their families here too and take advantage of the amenities and, the trails and the schools and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's why we feel like it's important to create options so that everyone has that opportunity. And really, I mean, it's the right thing to do answer, but there's also it's the right thing to do for our collective prosperity answer, right? Like, it's a business decision. If businesses can't find employees, they're not going to do business here anymore. And what we're seeing is a lot of the businesses that have been created in Hamilton County in the last 10 years, 15 years, aren't paying enough for the people who work at those businesses to live here. So that becomes a problem. It becomes a problem recruiting employees. If access to a workforce is an issue, it's a problem keeping employees because, maybe they are driving in from Anderson or Kokomo or Indianapolis to work in the Westfield, Taco Bell because they pay a little bit more than the Kokomo Taco Bell. But sooner or later, the car is going to break down or gas prices are going to go back up. And the employee is like, I drive by 3 Taco Bells on my way to Westfield. Why don't I just work at one of those and save the gas money and the wear and tear on my car? So, that's why it's important for us to have housing options for the types of jobs that we're creating, as well as for the CEOs. A lot of communities really like to focus on the fact that we're not trying to attract, minimum wage jobs. Although those, you don't have to try to attract those. They're everywhere.
Yeah. We all are going to want to go get a sandwich at lunch, right? We all need to go to the grocery store and get some groceries on our way home.
But cities will tell you, but we're going after nanotechnology or, health sciences or whatever. And that's great. Carmel obviously did a great job of building a corporate headquarters, along the US 31 corridor. Like, that's C-suite level jobs. That's great. But somebody's got to empty the trash can, right? Somebody's got to clean the bathrooms. For every one high-paid job that is created, there are 5 support jobs out there, and 3 of those don't pay enough for people to live here. So we're perpetuating the problem, and we feel like, as a nonprofit, we're not in it to make money, right? I mean, we have to cover our bills, but if we don't try to solve the problem, no one will, because for-profit businesses are obviously their mission is to make money, and more power to them. We rely on their success to help support us, but somebody's got to figure it out.
Yeah, the challenge of the free market along with the community support at the same time. My significant other, she works as a hairstylist in Noblesville, and a lot of the stylists can't afford to live in Hamilton County. A lot of them live in Anderson or Elwood, and they have to commute a fair amount, 20, 30 minutes, 40 minutes to get to work every day. And so I definitely understand what you're saying there.
Yeah.
Can you share a notable success story related to somebody that's worked with you?
Absolutely. I mean, I think what a lot of people don't realize is what a difference having safe, stable housing makes in a person's life. A lot of us, I think, are fortunate enough that we haven't had to worry about it, right? Like maybe during COVID, we worried like, hey, are we going to be able to cover the mortgage payment? But even then, the bank's not going to come knocking on the door 3 days later and say, get out, the way a landlord might.
Yeah.
So we have a resident, we have different, anytime we build a new community, we try to identify the population that we're going to serve at that community. We started out building for seniors because we saw they were really being left out of the market, especially if they didn't want to own a home anymore. There really wasn't a lot of rental housing available that you could afford on Social Security, which a lot of our residents are just living purely on Social Security. But then we also saw, obviously, there's a lot more need out there. Workforce housing is a popular phrase that's being thrown around now. It's just another way to describe the need for affordable housing for the workers, for the school bus drivers, home health care aides, the hairdressers, like these are folks who work hard in our community, make our community greater. They should be able to live here. There are also special populations, folks with disabilities, veterans, people with substance abuse issues, and folks who have survived a domestic violence situation is another special population we work with. So we have a few units set aside specifically for that population. We have one resident who moved into one of those units. She was 24 hours from taking her family to a shelter. She had been in an abusive relationship, which in addition to physical abuse and emotional abuse included financial abuse. The house, her car had been repossessed because the husband controlled the finances and wasn't making payments. The home was in foreclosure, which really affected her credit. So she couldn't, get approved. What she could get approved for wasn't big enough for her family. So she was, making the difficult decision that a shelter was really the only way she was going to be able to make this break and start a new life. 24 hours before moving to shelter, she got approved to move into one of our units for folks who have been in domestic violence situation. She's an educated woman, had been working actually on her doctorate. Within 4 months of having housing that she didn't have to worry about whether she could pay the bills, she had finished her doctorate, is now a doctor with her PhD, teaching at a major university, still living in her housing, and she doesn't want it to be her forever home, but it's what she needs right now until she can get her family in a position to move on to whatever is next for her. So that's the kind of hope that we want to offer people, is if we can take the concern about how you're going to pay your rent or whether you're going to be able to stay here, or the conditions of the house. There are some affordable options in every community that you wouldn't want your worst enemy to live in, right? And they're affordable because they are not habitable, but because so many people have no other options, they're choosing to live in situations where, they're infested with vermin, the windows don't lock, there are holes, there's no insulation. I mean, I drive by places in rural communities all the time that I am sure are boarded up and vacant, and then I see somebody, pop out of the door, and I think, oh, I hope they own that. And it's some slumlord. But that's the reality, is when you don't have housing, like where you're going to sleep tonight, how you're going to stay out of the cold, occupying as much brain space, you have a lot of ability to take care of other things. For not everyone, it's getting their PhD. I mean, that's an unusual, remarkable example, but there's always something, right? Going back to school. We have another resident at one of our new properties who was really having trouble making ends meet. She's a single mom. She got connected with one of our nonprofit partners and went to get trained to be a medical assistant. Now she's working as a medical assistant. Her income's up a little bit, and she can afford, a little bit better environment for her and her son. So that's the type of story we'd love to tell, because, we'll be even happier to tell it when both of those people kind of move on to their next, whatever that might be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Their next housing.
Those are great stories. Yeah, it just kind of highlights, I think it's easy to be like, oh, well, a lot of what you're talking about just is happening down in Indianapolis or, in Marion County, but, it's definitely happening here in Hamilton County as well.
For sure. That's one of the biggest misconceptions, not to jump ahead, but is that there isn't any need. And, we meet regularly with folks who are interested in getting involved with the organization. And that's a common misperception that, we're rich up here. Like, where's the need? So the kind of astonishing trivia fact that I throw out there, and I'll present it as a question to you: how many food banks do you think Hamilton County, one of the richest counties in the state, has operating on a?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm not aware of any, actually.
But you're smart enough to know, because I asked the question.
I think there's probably at least some food pantries at like some churches around town, but I don't know, maybe one or two food banks.
So if you go to Good Samaritan Network, website, they have a directory of food pantries. And last I counted, which was 2 weeks ago, there were 44 food pantries in Hamilton County. Now, they're not all open every day, you know, and a lot of them are at churches, but that just speaks to the need, right?
Yeah.
We know there are people who choose to live in Hamilton County, even though it means paying 50, 60, even 80% of their income on housing, because the schools are great. You know, they have kids with disabilities, and Hamilton Southeastern Schools is known for helping kids with disabilities prepare for successful futures. So they make a decision, I'm going to pay 80% of my income to live in HSC school district so that my kids can get that level of service. And if it means I got to get my food from a food bank, then I'll get my food from a food bank.
Wow.
This is a community of opportunity that people want to be in so that they and their kids can have better lives. And we're just helping them accomplish that. The reality is most of these people are already here. That's another one of the things we get, you know, like, we don't want you to build this here because then poor people will move here. No, they're already here. They're just paying too much to live here.
Yeah.
Because we've created this environment. And I'm not saying that as a like, well, let's create a worse environment so they wouldn't want to build here. I mean, we've created this wonderful environment. Of course people want to live here.
Yeah.
And organizations like ours just help make that happen. So that Conner Prairie, you know, has the staff they need to create that wonderful experience. And our grocery stores can stay open during COVID and make sure we have all of our, you know, French toast ingredients and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are really great points. So you talked a little bit about misconceptions people have about affordable housing in Hamilton County. Are there any additional common misconceptions that people have about affordable housing? There
are more misperceptions than accurate perceptions, probably, but the lack of need's the big one. I think another one is there's this instant pushback. If you create this here, there's going to be crime. My property values are going to decline. Traffic's going to be terrible. You know, those are the kind of standard points of opposition that we hear when we go into a new community and propose building something. We built 11 units in Fishers in an area that probably has 2,000 homes within a mile radius. And they talk to us about traffic and crime and property values. The reality is, what people imagine when you say affordable housing, most people, if you say close your eyes and picture affordable housing, they're picturing like Cabrini Green in Chicago from the 60s, right? This apartment tower that's overcrowded and overflowing with poor people with, you know, who don't have jobs and nothing to do, or, you know, just wanted to cause trouble. That's not what affordable housing is. That was public housing in the 60s, and there's a reason it doesn't exist anymore. Affordable housing, yes, we get help from public funding sources, but they're privately owned. We hand a nonprofit based in Noblesville own our properties and maintain our ownership. We've never sold a property. We don't intend to, knock on wood, because you never know. But, you know, it isn't that image that pops into your mind. And I think once people see the product it is that we build, like I said, there's no difference in cost to build affordable housing or market rate housing. We're using the same studs and the same drywall. And, you know, maybe we're going to make a different decision on, you know, our countertops or our cabinets or whatever. But for the by and large, you know, the toilets, the stuff that costs most of the money is all the same.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, why would that affect your property value any more than, you know, a production builder coming and building the neighborhood next door? It's not going to affect. The reality is there have been national studies done that show well-designed, well-maintained properties actually increase the property values of surrounding properties. And traffic, you know,
we've already got enough traffic here, right?
Like, we don't need any more, but I'm sorry.
No. I'm saying, like, is really a few more people really gonna hurt it? You know, hurt what we have going on.
Drops in the ocean gonna really cause it to flood. So, and then I think the other, and I kind of talked about this a little bit before, but the other misperception is that creating affordable housing is going to bring those people in, whoever those people might be, right? Someone other than us. And the reality is, like, those people are probably living next door to you now, but they're having trouble meeting their mortgage, right? Yeah. They are you and me. They are the people that we see in the grocery store. They're the people we talk to at the dry cleaners. Like, there isn't of those people. right? Everybody at some point in their life needs a little bit of help. And that's what we're trying to do, is provide that stable foundation for people so that they can figure out the other stuff going on in their lives and create a plan for how to move on to whatever comes next.
Yeah, and I think it sounds like a lot of that fear you're talking about is like that fear of just the unknown.
Right,
People,
absolutely.
they don't know, and the situations they're not aware of.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we had talked with an organization called Safe Families for Children recently, and what was really interesting was that a lot of the families that need help, it's exactly what you're talking about. They need housing. They're homeless, which doesn't look like the homeless people think. It's like sleeping on somebody's couch, but
they're tripled up in an apartment meant for one family.
Exactly. And it's because they're like trying to find affordable housing, or they need just like a little bit of help. Like I think you described earlier, where it's like, I just need a little finish my degree, or I need this hand to help pull me up,
so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's great what you're doing. To kind of dig in a little more, so how many units do you have now? Like, are there plans for you to like gain more units? What does that look like?
So we're active developer. Our plan is to continue building as long as we can keep getting funding and keep finding land. We know.
I was gonna say, how do you find land?
I mean, just like anybody else does. We have alerts set up on the listing services. Our ideal piece of land is one that's not for sale yet, but will soon be, and is now owned by someone who loves the community and doesn't want to, maximize, see how much money they can make on their land. I mean, it's a unicorn. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So,
especially with the property values are just like going up. Like an acre of land in Hamilton County is like $80,000 to $100,000.
Maybe farmland, but if it's in somewhere, like we paid a lot. We have a little less than an acre in Carmel, but it's not farmland. It's in a neighborhood, and it was significantly more than 80.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way. So that's one of our challenges is we're competing with everybody else who wants land, right? We typically, because our projects are smaller, we're not out there looking for 50 acres or 100 acres, 5 acres or less. We can do a lot with that. So from that perspective, we have a little bit of an advantage because we're not going up against the production builders, right? But we are competing against like wealthy people who might want to buy a lot and build a McMansion on it. We might be going after the same 5 acres for that, where we're going to put, multiple phases of affordable rental housing on it, and they're going to plop, one big multi-million-dollar home. They're certainly entitled to do that. There's nothing wrong with it, but that's one of our challenges, is that we're competing against this.
So you got first find the land,
and then in the past, we have made offers for land contingent on getting funding for the award, or for the project, which makes it the timeline for the closing. Most people, when they list a property for sale, they want to sell it, get their money, and move on. And the faster you can close, the more advantage you have, right? We're making offers on land saying, okay, we'll pay you this, and because of this next part, we'll pay you what you ask, or maybe a little more than your asking price, but we can't close for 18 months, and we won't know for sure whether we're going to, we need 6 months to figure out if we really are going to close or not. And then if we are, then it'll be another 12 months before.
I can't even imagine. It's got to be made incredibly difficult to gain.
Owners are like, really?
Yeah.
So we have figured out, we have access in Hamilton County. We're very fortunate. We have some community development block grant funding, which comes from the federal government. Because of the size of Hamilton County, it gets its own pot of money from HUD for that. And so we are able to use those funds to acquire property. That's a recent development, and it's been life-changing for us. So
I bet.
Because we're a nonprofit. Now, for-profit developers couldn't do that. So that's why it's difficult to get affordable housing developed, because the small organizations, we're limited to our impact, right? I can only build 11 units at a time because of reasons that you would understand, but
yeah.
But then the big guys, can't make any money on it. So
yeah. And so you get a piece of land, then how are you developing it? Like, you have builders you work with, I'm assuming.
we do. We have to get the money. And so we kind of come up with a plan of what we think we can do on the land, depending on the size, where construction costs are. And we did a project I probably mentioned today in Fishers, was 11 units. When we got it funded, it was about a $2.83 million project. By the time, it was during COVID, and so the interest rates went up, construction costs went up, and all of a sudden we were $1 million short. So that got delayed while we, found additional money. But typically we figure out what we can accommodate on the site, about how many units we can build based on the funding that we apply for. Then we apply for the funding, which is it's like apply in March, find out in June, and then go through an environmental review process for another 90 days. So it's from application to actually getting the money is like 9-10 months.
Yeah.
Then we kind of guesstimate at application what we think the project will cost based on our experience. And maybe we might bring a contractor in to say, hey, if we want to build 3 duplexes, 3 3-bedroom duplexes with about this kind of footprint, like what would that run us? And then we have to, think about engineering, because oftentimes we're, developing land that hasn't previously been developed. So we've got to do drainage and water quality and all that good stuff. But we typically do request for proposals from the trades. We hire historically we've hired an architect, an engineer, and a contractor. But as costs have gone up, we've kind of looked for ways that we can save. So our last 2 RFPs, we've asked for an engineer and then a design build combo, where in our Carmel project, we actually only solicited home builders because we wanted to kind of try that. We had been working with general contractors.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that works. We're just getting started. We have a general contractor. We have a project going right now in Carmel. It'll be 3 duplexes. That's funded. That's we're working with the home builder. And then we have a 3 duplex project in Noblesville that's funded, that we're working with a general contractor and an engineer. But the contractor brought designs to us. So
Gotcha.
So do you mainly just do then like buying and developing property? Do you also buy like existing homes and then try to remodel them and get them in better shape, or things of that nature?
Yeah, we don't typically do like individual one-off homes because of just the way our financing works. There's advantages to, kind of clustering projects. So I can't imagine us doing a project of less than 4 units at a time, just because of all the effort that goes into doing one. But we have done a couple kind of acquisition rehab projects, one in Lebanon, actually, where we acquired 17 existing duplexes that were built in the 50s. Stone and brick, so they were solid, but they really had very little investment or love and attention since the 50s. So we acquired those and then had some funding to help, kind of start to update the properties, electrical and HVAC and that sort of thing. We ran out of money fast. You know how remodels go, right? You don't know what you don't know till you pop the hood, and it was messy under there. So we're still kind of figuring that one out. That was the first time we had tried that. Acquire an existing rental property and rehab it and make it affordable and keep it affordable. In Noblesville, we have done a couple historic rehabs, 3 buildings on 8th Street in Noblesville, which is where our offices are, that were vacant commercial buildings. We acquired them and then rehabbed them. One has, as I said, our offices, and then we have 4 apartments above us, and then the other 2 have a total of 10 units in them. So, but those were a little bit, easier because they weren't occupied, and we could, gut them and kind of start from scratch, as opposed to trying to maintain a place that someone can live in while the work is being done is a lot more difficult. And then one of our new projects that just came online this year, the city of Noblesville actually gave us 3 houses on historic Pleasant Street.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's great. They're really making Pleasant Street nice.
They are. They had acquired them to tear them down. The original Pleasant Street project that you're referring to was going to actually come down Pleasant Street. And so they started acquiring property for that. And then the neighbors, when they found out about the road project, were like, we don't really want a bypass going down our street. And so they organized and got the neighborhood designated as a historic neighborhood, which meant the city really couldn't tear down houses on Pleasant Street. So we took advantage of that opportunity and offered to take those houses off the city's hands and applied for some funding and rehab them. So One of the houses we ended up having to tear down because a previous owner had thought roof trusses were optional. So there were some structural issues there. So we did tear that down and rebuild. But the other two, one is a duplex and one is just a 2-bedroom single family. It was basically a studs down rehab. We had to abate asbestos and lead, base paint and all that good stuff. But if you would walk in them now, you would never know they were over 100 years old. And they have vaulted ceilings. They're beautiful. So
that's great.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that we'll do a lot more like that. That project really, the financials really were helped by the fact we didn't have to pay for the properties because the rehab was significantly costly. But, we'll certainly, if anybody wants to give us property, we will do our best.
That's what I was about to say. If there's anybody out there that inherits a house right, because we see it a lot where people inherit properties.
And like, what do I do with this?
By the time they get us out to give them a quote, and then the whole house is kind of
it's been
more than dated. I don't know, that step where it's it's just been kind of ignored for a long time, due for whatever reason. It's well, this is the perfect place to give it to, right? Yeah.
We do have a lot. Maybe not a lot, but most of the older housing stock in Hamilton County. Hamilton County, most of our housing stock has been built since 1990. I would have to look up that statistic, but I would be shocked if it's not 80% built, maybe since the 80s. But what we're seeing now, though, is a lot of the older kind of naturally affordable housing, like what you're talking about. It's dated. It's, somebody, you can build a house for, $350,000, or you could buy this for $300,000, but you got to put another $200,000 in it, right?
Yeah.
They're just getting torn down, and developers are coming in and tearing down, 16 single family homes and proposing 250, condos and apartments and things like that. And that, that's great. All housing is good. We need more housing. That's why we have a shortage of affordable housing, because we don't have enough housing, period. Right. And so you have people who don't necessarily need affordable housing living in housing that is affordable, right? Little a affordable, because they can't afford to move. You have seniors living in their family homes that really would love to move into an empty nester home, but they just can't afford it.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. We had Eric Hewer, who's a realtor in Hamilton County, come in and talk with us recently, and he showed us a graph that basically said, in decade periods, 10-year periods, for a long time, we were building 20, 25 million homes a year. And then when the market crashed in 2012, it went down to 5 million, a quarter of what it was in the decades prior. And so, Fed Chairman Powell has said this, just lowering interest rates isn't going to fix our housing crisis here in the country. And we see it, especially, it's like you said, it's people's homes, especially so many homes changed hands over the last few years since COVID or during COVID. And they paid top dollar for a house that needs work.
Yeah.
But then they also have this really low interest rate.
Right. So they're stuck.
Yeah, they're stuck because they don't want to leave, because, then they got to move on to twice the interest rate in another house that's more expensive than the one they're already in. And then it becomes unaffordable even for your average middle-class homeowner. And so housing affordability, I think, is just that gap of what it used to be,
right?
Whereas you're low income, you can't afford a house, is you could be middle income now and still not afford a house. And I think what you've kind of outlined here today is we're all humans and we all have struggles, and so then we end up in this I'm still making a decent living for myself, but to stay here in Hamilton County or on the north side suburbs, it's become very difficult.
Yeah. If you think about in the 50s, or probably earlier than that, buying a house, the average sale price of a house was about 3 times the average income. And that's how we ended up with 30%. What is affordable? It's relative. It's typically about 30%. If you spend 30% or less of your total income on housing, it's affordable. That's, little a affordable, no subsidies or whatever.
Yeah.
But now that's the origin of that, right? This is the average salary. This is the average sale price 3 times.
Yeah.
But now the average sale price of homes is 12 times the median salary. I mean, it depends on the market you're in, but it's how home prices have risen much faster than incomes. Yeah. And that's the problem, is this gap just keeps growing. And so where it used to just be this, you work in a minimum wage job, of course you can't afford to buy a house. But now you've got people that are earning 120% of median income for an area, accountants that can't afford to buy a house in their community because not because of anything they did, but because home prices have just gone up so much more quickly than incomes. And we're never going to get them to come down or incomes to go up. So what do we do? Right.
Yeah. I think that's a great question. Like, what do we do? Because it used to be, I don't rent anymore, but when I would rent in the past, it was, you needed, I believe it was like
three times, two times.
Yeah. 3 times, 2 times, depending on gross or net income of what you could afford.
Right.
And what they would rent to you for. And, it still always surprises me. We were talking about it with Eric, where it's like, there's a neighborhood called the Timbers off 38 in Noblesville, and they are putting up these $500,000, $700,000 houses, and they're selling.
It's affordable for somebody.
Yeah, I mean, so there's the demand is still huge for those, and I think it just drives up everything because people are willing to buy $500,000 to $700,000 houses, and that demand's so high. Then the demand for a less expensive house is just as high as well.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It makes it really, really tough.
It is. And I think the answer, there is an answer, but one of the answers is we just need a variety of housing. We can't only build $500,000 homes. We can't only build luxury apartments that, a 1-bedroom apartment is $1,500 a month. There are some people that can afford that. And there may be a lot of people that can afford it, especially as the area continues to grow and COVID changed things so that you don't have to actually live near where you work anymore. So if you work a tech job in California where, I don't know how people afford to live in California, but you could, sell your, starter home in California and use that money to probably buy a $750,000 house for cash. That's affordable for them. But what about the people that have been here forever and aren't earning the salaries that you see on the coast? Those people are coming here and driving our prices up and strengthening our economy. I'm not saying I don't want them here, but it's like, what do we do for the people that are already here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it used to be there were so many of these, we call them vinyl villages going up everywhere. And I don't feel like we see as many of those vinyl villages going up compared to, like you said, these huge $50-60 million apartment developments. Or near my house, they're doing a $250 million development. The Timbers, like I was talking about, Lennar's doing.
Yeah.
Why are we seeing more of those?
I think it's a pushback against the vinyl villages. I think Hamilton County in particular grew so fast. And there it was largely sort of like the Wild West, right? Like Fisher's was like strip malls, build them. Housing subdivisions, build them.
You used to be able to buy houses for $120,000, $150,000.
In 2002 and bought my house for $150,000.
Yeah.
My last tax assessment was like $325,000.
That's what they say.
I haven't done a darn thing to it.
Yeah, I was gonna say those ones that were $120,000, $150,000 are now $300,000 to $400,000 houses still in these villages.
My house is not worth that money. No way.
Yeah.
But it's the demand, right? But then it's also it's a never ending kind of spiral, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. How are we ever going to see that kind of end? Do we need to build a bunch more of these affordable neighborhoods like the vinyl villages again?
That's where I was going, is I think the pushback on that was to go the opposite way and to say no vinyl, right? No, we got to have brick on everything.
Yeah. Hardy.
Right.
Hardboard.
In Carmel, they don't even like hardy fiber cement board within 18 inches of the ground. They prefer that you have a stone or brick for the first 18 inches. And so in my previous life, I wrote about that stuff, right? And I saw it. And I saw the reactions that plan commissions had. It was like, that neighborhood over there we let, go up. And I don't really like how, you just see the backs of those houses and they're all just flat. So, this subdivision, when it comes in, let's require that the backs of the house all have like some sort of 3-dimensional element to it, whether it's a, push out window or whatever. And all of that stuff increased the cost, right? So now we're saying 25% of the cost of a new house is just that kind of crap that cities have said, we want you to do this because we don't want to have another vinyl village.
Yeah.
Right. We're classier than that now. Yeah. And so that increases the cost. So, I mean, that's part of it is you have to be aware of what the development regulations, how that impact the cost of building something. And communities can mitigate that, right? The communities are also really interested in making sure that they're capturing, road impact fees and sewer impact fees and park impact fees and all those different things, which, certainly makes sense if you're talking about a, 400 home development in a cornfield. But if you're talking about adding 11 homes in an area that already has roads and already has parks and already has 1,000 residents within a mile of there, like, do we really, are we really impacting all of those things enough that we should have to pay as much as, proportionately as much as these big guys? Or could communities make it a little easier on developers that are trying to meet a need and not see how much money they can make?
Yeah, like how do we get them to start putting in like, we need so much affordable housing going in as a percentage of the higher end homes that are going in?
So funny you should ask. In the state of Indiana, it is actually illegal for communities to do that, to say, to make blanket statements or requirements that if you're going to come in my community and build 100 homes, 10% of them have to be affordable. That's called inclusionary zoning, and the state of Indiana made it illegal in 2017. So that's one of, when I say we advocate, that's one of the things I want to make people aware of, that, make our state legislators aware of the problem that policy is causing. So now communities can't say, hey, we need affordable housing, and in order to do that, we're gonna make this rule, right? Communities can't do that. They can use the leverage that they have, if a developer is asking for a tax abatement, or in the case of Noblesville, an apartment building got built in downtown Noblesville on land, and a portion of the land the city owned. So for the city to sell that portion of the land to the developer, they said 10% of the units in this apartment building need to be affordable if you want to buy our land, right? That's not illegal. And that's what happened. But there aren't a lot of communities or community leaders that are brave enough to go up against that perception of not in my backyard, right? We don't need it. We don't want it. It's going to hurt my property values. It's going to drive up crime. It's going to affect traffic. Elected officials hear that and they go, well, then we won't do it.
Yeah.
Right. And what we need is elected officials who understand the need and are willing to push back against those people and say, no, it's not gonna impact your property values.
Right.
It's not going to increase crime.
And these are good people. They're just on tough times, and they need a little help like everybody else does at some point in their life, right?
And that's the problem, is this conversation really has focused on the people and who is going to be living in this housing instead of just the housing. You know, if you took the people out of it, I think it'd be a lot easier to get the stuff approved, but people have fears, and they, and that's exactly what it is. You mentioned that before, that, it's a lot of it is fear-based. I'll give you another example. We have a community, a 10-unit community in Carmel along 106th Street between College and the Mona. And when we proposed, it used to be Home Place. When we started building,
that's what I was going to say. It sounds like Home Place.
And when we started, it was Home Place. It hadn't been annexed yet. And Home Place was kind of historically underinvested in an area. Like, nobody had come and solved drainage issues, right? And put up new construction. And so we came in and we thought Home Place is going to be you're going to fix that drainage problem at that spot, and you're going to add some housing for us, and this is going to be great. And these people came out of the woodwork to no, we don't want it. We don't need it. But anyway, so one of the neighbors there was just, adamant. We do not want this here. I don't want those people. I don't want this development. And he put up no trespassing tape along his entire property line. It's not like a straight line. It's and called the cops multiple times during construction when like a piece of construction equipment would be on our side of the property line, but maybe would swing over in the air above the, and he called the cops, and finally the cops are just like, dude, stop calling us. Like, they're just building something. They're not running their equipment through their yard. Like, you know, it got done. People got moved in, and you know, before long, that tape came down. And he started wandering over and talking to the seniors that lived there. And they, oh, you know, it seems they had things in common. And, you know, now they're trading, you know, vegetables from their gardens and things like that. So it's just an example of, you know, it's easy to be afraid of something you don't know. But if you take the time to just get to know it, right? Like, don't be opposed to it just because you don't understand it. But take the time to maybe understand and learn a bit more. I think a lot more people would be supportive of the work that we do.
Yeah, I think there's that statistic out there that 75% of the things that we worry about in life never actually come true, right?
Yes.
And
all that wasted energy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, I think a lot of people, it's like understandable why it's like nobody really likes change.
Absolutely.
But it's like, if we're going to get to some solutions here in the near future, then we're going to need to change things a little bit.
We got to change something. We got to do something differently, figure something else out. Because
it's a challenge, right? Because we live in a free market, and then, and in the north side of Indy, right, there's a lot of money there. So there's a lot of opportunity for the free market to become profitable, but it's how do we be there for the community as well.
Yeah. I mean, we think it's really a stronger community if it has people of all incomes and ages and abilities and that sort of thing, right? We make each other stronger. So
absolutely.
I don't want to live in a neighborhood that posts a sign at the entrance of how much all the houses in there cost.
Yeah.
Right. I grew up in neighborhoods where, like, yeah, that was the nice house. And, there's, that one's a little more modest. And, oh, look, there's a duplex. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't know why I don't know how we got there. But I hope we get back to the old days when you could, live in a mixed income neighborhood and all be friends.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope it gets there too. It's definitely evolving right now. And hopefully I think it'll head in the right direction eventually. Yeah. So
I have confidence we do the right thing.
Yeah, we're all smart people here, and Indiana's a great state, so
for sure,
I think we'll figure it out.
Yeah, and it's a problem everywhere. It's not like it's just a problem we're having. So that's the other good news, is if anyone else figures it out, we can just borrow their ideas.
Yeah, exactly. No reason to reinvent the wheel, and
for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem that's happening across the country, and there's a lot, like we've said, there's just a lot of factors going into it right now. It's just a matter of time before the housing shortage, which I think is really the biggest issue here. It's just a housing shortage in general.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's like a $250 million development going in down the road from my house. And I noticed in our neighborhood the other day that they've put up signs against the development.
So that's the one that's dislocated in the eagle's nest?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I was hoping they were just going to leave the trees,
Right. That would be the easy solution.
Yeah. Well, we've been asking that question as we drive by it, actually. Like, they're going to have to leave those trees, right? That's protected. I guess not, no?
Yeah. No, I don't know. But that's the irony of it all, right? Is everywhere we live, certainly in Hamilton County, it was farmland, right? It didn't like spring up out of the earth as houses. So change had to occur for us to live where we live.
Yeah.
We have, it's kind of unreasonable to expect that we're going to develop what we've developed and then go, we're done.
Yeah.
No more.
Yeah.
That's just...
Nobody else is coming in our yard,
And, I've heard Christine Altman, one of the county commissioners here, say, and others have said this as well, if you're not growing, you're dying. That's the reality. So if we're going to continue to grow and we're going to continue to create housing, we need to create housing for everyone. It's not just for a segment of the population, one segment of the population. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we did some work. I'm not going to mention the person or the area, but we did some work for someone that is on a town council outside, a little further than the immediate suburbs.
Right.
And we said, well, you've got to be starting to see a bunch of building. Well, we don't want houses under $500,000. So if we see developments like that, then we don't approve them because we don't want that in our community.
And you're going to have a hard time finding school teachers eventually in that community.
Right, exactly. And
I don't know a lot of school teachers that can afford $500,000.
It's just like, where's the idea to just help each other anymore? It's tough. What advice would you have for people seeking affordable housing in Hamilton County?
It's there, so don't give up. But there's not nearly enough of it. So anywhere you find like capital A affordable, that is, somebody out there is making sure that the owner's following the rules, is going to have a waiting list. So I'd say identify it and get your name on all the lists for anywhere you would want to live. It's a process. I mean, we get calls all the time from people having housing emergencies, like, hey, I've got to be out, by Tuesday and I need a place to live. And all affordable housing is fully leased. And it's, income verification and asset verification and all that. It's about a 14-day process, at least, from initial application to approval. So be patient.
And even after they get approved, is there some waiting period, maybe even to force them to find out affordable housing to be?
It kind of depends on how the leasing people handle it. From the time that someone puts in an application and initiates that, like, income verification process, that application is only good for 120 days. So we're not going to even do that until we know we have a unit coming available, right? Like somebody says, I'm going to move out next month. We say, okay, let's find somebody. So there can be a wait, just depending, maybe somebody gave us 3 months notice and we start the process. So there could be a wait after approval until the unit's available, but it just depends on the property. And it's more complicated than just affordable housing, because most, like our developments, and I'm sure all of the other developments, if I have 10 units, like a certain number of the units are available to this income level and a certain number are available to this income level and a certain to this. So depending on where you fall, which bucket you fall into, there might not be any availability, even though we have vacant units, because you might need a 40% unit and all we have open is a 60% unit.
Yeah.
I know that's way more important.
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, it helps people understand a little more of what's going on. It's easy to be like, well, I'm not getting what I want, and there's empty units. What doesn't make sense,
right? Yeah. And I think the other thing that's really important is, it's not something that most people are proud of, that they need help. We need an affordable option, but rather than, sort of hide that, I would tell your elected officials, like, I'm a nonprofit executive in Hamilton County and I can't afford to live here, right? If I hadn't moved here and got my house for $150,000, there is no way I could live in Hamilton County.
Yeah.
As I encounter people who have housing issues, that's what I tell them. Tell your elected officials, tell your city councilor, tell your mayor, I've lived here my whole life and I can't afford to live here anymore. And that should get their attention, because, I don't envy elected officials their role. They're trying to make the best decisions they can for their communities, and they've got 100 different opinions, trying to influence them. But if they don't hear from that segment of the population, that they're not going to know that the need is there.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. What's your message to the audience?
Well, I don't know. Thank you. Thanks. I hope you're still awake. I appreciate the time you're taking to really kind of dig in and understand this. The new mayor of Carmel appointed a housing task force when she took office this year, because she heard so much in the community about the need for affordable housing. And I really applaud any effort that anybody makes to dig in and really understand what's happening here. It's not as simple as most people make it sound, either for or against. It's not cut and dried. And there are probably simple explanations for how we got to this point, but there aren't any simple solutions of how we're going to get out of it. So it really is going to require everybody kind of working together. The first step being to acknowledge that we really do need housing options for all types of people at all income levels in our community, because any one of us at any time could be there, right? Like I could get divorced tomorrow and not be able to afford my mortgage anymore. And then what do I do? Do I have to leave Hamilton County? Any one of us can have something happen in our life that changes our housing needs. And we shouldn't have to change where, our community and leave our support networks and our lives because of it. So the more we can do to work together to provide housing for everyone, the better off we'll all be, I feel like.
I agree. That sounds exactly correct. Is there anything you would like to promote today? Any initiatives that you have going on or anything in general?
Let's see. It's a nonprofit and we're in the last month of the year. So year-end giving is always high on all nonprofits' wish lists, donations. We do have, because we're a community development organization and work to improve the communities and the neighborhoods that we operate in, we do have access to what's called neighborhood assistance. The neighborhood assistance program is a state program that allows us to give tax credits to donors. So we have a little bit of those left for the end of the year. If people make donations of $100 or more to hand, we can give them the equivalent of 50% of that donation as a state tax credit. So let's say you paid the state $200 in property tax or in income taxes last year. You give us $100, we give you a $50 credit. So this year you'll only owe the state $150 and you helped hand.
Yeah.
So it lowers your tax credit, your tax bill, and supports a nonprofit. So you can go to our website if you're interested in that, handincorporated.org.
Okay.
We also, it's a long way off and I can't promote a specific date yet because we're still nailing it down. But one of the things we do every spring is have a housing conference where we try to educate the community about the need and some potential solutions and try to kind of rally support around that. So that's going to be in late April.
Okay.
We're still looking at a location, but stay tuned. And
yeah, please let us know when you figure it out. We'd love to
That's really the best opportunity if somebody wants to learn more is to come to that, and we'll plug you in anywhere you want to be to stay involved. So
yeah, so it's not just a matter of state and federal funding; it's a matter of you also get help from the residents.
For sure, yeah. I mean, we're a nonprofit just like other nonprofits. We do get funding from the state and federal government for our construction projects, but that doesn't necessarily trickle down to our operations. We've got to find the land, like you said, negotiate, find financing, and all of that takes people, and people take money. So
yeah, absolutely. So what are 5 main things that people need to have to ensure successful, affordable housing?
So you're saying like someone who needs the housing, what does a community need?
Yeah, I would say what does a community need more? What are 5 things? Like if we're gonna make a cake or make a pie,
right?
What are the 5 ingredients we need to make that affordable housing
successful? I think first of all is having the buy-in from the leaders of a community. If a community supports a project, I think that just puts it miles ahead of a project that the community doesn't support. Right. Both kind of emotionally and actually, right? Like it's an advantage, but also if a community supports a project, it could, provide fee waivers and maybe donate property and that sort of thing. There are lots of ways a community can demonstrate its support. Let me put it that way. Money obviously is important. Having supportive residents, so that the elected officials or the leaders don't feel like they're in so much jeopardy. If they know that they are in a community that really understands the need, it's a lot less risky for them to support a project. The 3 most important things in real estate, right? Location. That's a really, that's something we hear a lot when we are very intentional about the locations that we choose. Our funding applications are competitive, and so they're scored. And we get points for things like proximity to transportation, proximity to major employers, other positive uses like doctor's offices and childcare facilities and things like that. Most communities, if they admit they need affordable housing, want to put it like out by the dump or, by the water treatment facility or out somewhere that no one is going to have to see it. And, again, it kind of all goes back to the community support that, understand that whoever's choosing these locations is choosing them for a reason. And right. It's, we heard a lot in Fishers, we had to go through a rezone, and we heard a lot of, we love what you're doing. We just don't think this is the right place for it. It's like, trust me, I know a lot more about you about what the right place for this is. So that's an important one. We want our residents in these communities to be in a position to succeed. We know low-income residents oftentimes don't have 2 cars in a household, so they need to be close to alternative transportation options or jobs that they can maybe ride their bike to or walk to, that sort of thing. That's really kind of probably one of the biggest keys to success of an affordable housing development in a community is where is it? And, how well does it sort of blend in versus Caprini Green, kind of standing out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it certainly would make it tough. It's like you don't have a car.
Right.
No way to really get around, and then you're out on the outskirts of town.
Exactly. And the suburbs, we're doing better, but they weren't originally designed for people to walk around a lot, right? They're designed for you to hop in your car and drive. So
yeah, the new bike paths are definitely helping.
Yeah, and the trails and
so we're getting there. I think
yeah, definitely
in that right direction.
Yeah, and I think a lot, like certainly in Carmel and even Fishers now you're seeing a lot more, kind of like let's develop, this node together that everybody can walk it and that sort of thing.
So yeah, it's getting there.
It's getting there. We'll get there.
Yeah. What are some common red flags? Somebody that's looking for affordable housing, what should they, what would be a red flag or what would be red flags for them when they're out there?
You don't want to.
Yeah, like, how do I, like I'm in a bad spot. I'm looking for a place, but like, ooh, is this really a good deal for me?
Yeah. I think just common sense is probably my best. If you're looking at a place that has evidence that, there are mouse traps and ant traps and that sort of thing, like they're probably there for a reason. This is kind of one of my soapboxes, but we hear a lot of negative feedback from people about Section 8. And I think there's a misperception that Section 8 is sort of synonymous with affordable housing and Caprini Green and like all that is bad with public housing. And that's certainly based on history, but it's not based on current reality. Section 8 was a federal program that once was used to like build properties, and they were publicly owned, public housing, and that's not ideal. The Section 8 program now is actually called the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and instead of using the funds to build housing, they give the funds to a renter who can then take it and choose somewhere to live, right? But the landlord has to accept it. And a lot of landlords choose not to accept Section 8 vouchers because they feel like they're going to get, they're
going to trash their house.
Right.
Yeah.
Certainly the luxury apartment complexes oftentimes won't accept Section 8 vouchers, and that's certainly their prerogative. What concerns me is private landlords and maybe non-luxury apartments that don't accept Section 8 vouchers. To me, that says I don't want to be subject to the regulation and the oversight that comes from accepting this guaranteed payment from the government. Like, you think about it, most landlords would be like, oh, I have a choice between renting to someone who may or may not pay me rent or renting to someone that I know I'm going to get the bulk of the rent directly from the government, and then they're going to pay, their portion of it.
Yeah.
As a landlord, I'm going to take guaranteed payment from the government every day. And the only reason I'm going to say no to that is if I don't want the government coming and looking and making sure that I've got a good place to live. So if I'm looking for a place to live, I'm going to ask, do you accept Section 8 vouchers? And if they say no, and it's not like this beautiful luxury place, I'm going to say, why? And that, to me, that would be the number one red flag. And we certainly have that where landlords who shouldn't be even like
landlords.
Yes. Who, say they'll take them, and yeah, it's a bad scene. So I want somebody who's going to take a voucher every day.
That makes sense. Yeah, I know some real estate investors, and that's all they do are Section 8 homes, because it's a guaranteed check every single month. And all they got to do is meet this certain pretty basic standards, right?
Yeah. And it's not, the other red flag, or not really red flag, but thing to be aware of is with properties like ours and like tax credit developments, like there are several Cumberland Cottages is ours. Cumberland Crossing in Fishers is a tax credit property. It's affordable. Greystone in Noblesville has some affordable units. I'm not going to remember them all, so I'm not going to just as an example, when a property enters, becomes affordable, there's a clock ticking, and that affordability period expires at some point. Most people who move into that kind of housing have no idea when the affordability period ends. Most people probably aren't aware that it ever ends, right? And I just want to be careful. We're getting to a point in several properties in Hamilton County that they're getting old enough that they could be coming out of affordability soon. It's kind of the owner's decision when you get near the end of affordability. Do I keep it affordable and reinvest in it, or do I sell it? Do I decide it's not going to be affordable anymore and notify everyone like, okay, as of this date, this is a market rate? And so that's certainly the prerogative of the owners. But as a consumer who needs affordable housing, if I'm going in a situation like that, I want to make sure it's not going to be unaffordable next year, right? Like ask those questions about when does the affordability period expire, and can I be reasonably assured that if I need to live here for 3 years that I'm going to be able to afford it?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, maybe they want to donate, they want to participate in any way, or they're looking for affordable housing, how should they reach out to Hand or to you?
Yes. So we have a website. That's probably the best way to kind of pick your path, choose your own adventure.
And it works. I tried it. That's how I got him here today.
It's a work in process. We're always improving it, hopefully. But that address is Hand Incorporated, all spelled out, unfortunately, .org. And then you can sign up for our email newsletter there and find out about all of the different opportunities. I will say if someone is interested in leasing a unit from us, I will direct them to a phone number. That's our leasing office. We do hire professionals to handle that separately from the development side. And that phone number is 317-758-5180. So as you might imagine, we have 157 units, to answer your earlier question that I glazed over.
That's okay.
And we're scattered. We don't have, our largest property is 60 units. And so the other 77 are scattered to the winds. So a lot of times folks aren't in the leasing office, just leave a message and they'll get back to you as soon as they can. But yeah, fun times.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming in, educating me. Like I said, I had heard about your organization. And when I heard about it, I said, holy cow, there's somebody even worrying about affordable housing in Hamilton County.
Somebody's got to do it.
Somebody's got to do it. So I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate you coming in and educating us. And, may ask you back in the future to learn more. Or would love to hear more about your, event, in April.
Yeah, definitely.
And I would love to talk to you more then.
Sounds great. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.